thank you for joining the show today.
What's up, Chris? Super hyped to be here.
I appreciate you coming from north of the border to join us, just specifically for this podcast and nothing else.
Nothing else.
Yeah, no other reason whatsoever. For those that maybe are tuning in and learning about you for the first time, why don't you give us a little background about who you are, what you've been through, and what you're doing now?
Who I am, what I've been through, and what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
All right, my name is Taryn Dubreuil. I'm the founder of Perfect Day Business Mentorship. I would call myself, I'm going to label it as a serial entrepreneur.
Okay.
I started out 20 owning a gym, it's the weirdest thing, not by choice. The gym burned down in our small little town.
Okay.
Standing across the street on top of a building, watching this gym burn down, and I was working for a chiropractor at the time, and we had been working out in that gym doing CrossFit. And he turned around and said to me, he's like, well, if it's any perfect time to go and start a gym, it's now, because our only gym in town is literally in ashes on the ground. And, being 20, young, dumb, don't really know what you're doing, you just follow along when someone says, this sounds like a great idea, and nod your head and say, I'm all in. And so, I spent the next 15 years growing this brand and this gym and helping change people's lives for, you speak to a lot of gym owners and we kind of all have the same similar story of how we got into it, that something like this helped change our own life. And then you want to turn around and just do the same thing for other people. And that was kind of my drive to do that too. So that became kind of the main thing. Started mentoring other gym owners, and now I mentor small service-based businesses to help build their businesses also.
I think that's interesting. I think I've always said there's two ways most of us have gotten into the gym ownership game, right? One was we were impacted greatly and decided we're givers, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So immediately we're like, we want to give back the same way. We want to grow that pie of people that can be impacted. But the other way is we had a terrible boss and we swore we'd never work for someone else again. And a gym is a pretty low-hanging fruit in terms of barrier to entry, right? So You combine the two things of terrible boss and being impacted by this thing, and it just makes a perfect thing.
I think that was kind of my motive too, is I knew I didn't want to work for someone else. I don't know if it was necessarily because of a bad boss experience or anything. I just knew that I kind of run my own race. I don't like to be dependent on other people. I want to write the storyline. I want to tell the story. And so just not working for someone else on someone else's demand of time and all those types of things. And so that's why I became an entrepreneur, I would say, was the thing I was looking for to get out of it.
I think it's really interesting too, because not everybody has a terrible boss experience at the moment, but I think we've all had at least one horror, one that sits in the back of your head, I will never be like that person.
Yeah.
But then the problem is we get into business and we become our own worst boss.
That's so true.
We become the worst boss we've ever had because we don't know boundaries. We don't know how to say no. We think we have to please everyone.
Yeah.
Right? We were having an off-camera conversation about that, and you realize the only people you should be pleasing is yourself, right? We got into this for all the right reasons, but if we're not happy as business owners, if we're not happy as entrepreneurs, that rolls downhill.
And I think the other part to play on to the end of that is that the awareness of when you get to that point is so far down the line as from where you actually should start to know it. And that just comes with experience and seeing it when it pops up sooner, right? But you definitely hit that spot where you're just oh, this is not how this story was supposed to play out. And now I'm starting to see the signs, and it's never too late, but you're definitely usually darker in the hole than you need to be. Yeah.
And I'm going to quote Bonnie Skinner on this. You're not looking for happiness, you're looking for fulfillment.
Yeah.
And you get into this thinking this is going to fulfill you. And then you realize there's so many other things you didn't consider that come into play with running a business. And then you realize not only are you not happy, you're not fulfilled. And I'm not saying that's a guarantee, that's forever. But what I am saying is everyone feels it. Everyone will hit that point at some point. And if you know someone that owns a business and says they never have, they're a liar. Like guaranteed.
Straight up.
They have bottomed out at some point and had to climb out. Whether they learned it the hard way all at once, like it was just an avalanche over one decision. Like mine came when I raised rates at our gym and did it. If I could take it back, I would, right? I wouldn't take back everything I learned about human behavior and how people will treat you, but I would take back how we rolled that out, and I would definitely do it differently. But the number one thing I learned from that is like, there is like loyalty ends where price begins.
Yes. I hate that word. Like loyalty, this is going to, maybe other people have differing opinions, but it's hard, especially in the nature of this type of business, that we have. It comes with the job, right? It's such a relationship-based thing, and loyalty is always a part of that conversation. But, I always teach it as like loyalty should not be the thing that's in business. Like that's not the thing that you're judging the quality of the relationship or the strength of the relationship or whatever, right? Like you have an exchange of money for service, and that's in its most black and white form. That's what it is. And when you add loyalty into the conversation, you convolute it. And so the easier that a business owner can understand that, or ourselves can understand that, the client will never understand that because that's how they perceive, certain aspects of that relationship. But the sooner that the business owner can perceive that, like it's just going to start making your decision making so much easier.
Absolutely. You have to cut the emotional part.
Yeah.
Right.
I too had a rate increase that I would roll out differently, that resulted in a mass exodus, but it is what it is. And you take those lessons and you move forward with them.
It was still cheaper than college.
Yeah, that's true.
So, that's, I just wanted to get that out there that everyone has been through dark periods as a business owner. You're a business coach, so you probably see it even more in depth than even I do. Because when I talk to other business owners, we talk about the dark stuff, but we talk a lot about the positive. We try to be, we try to lift each other up. But as a business coach, I'm sure you really get to see like the more emotional, deeper side of what that bottom looks like and help people get out of it. What are some tips for people that may be stuck?
The very first thing I always say is like, you get 5 minutes to deal with the emotion part of it, right? Because we're human and naturally you're going to have a visceral reaction to whatever the said thing is that has happened, right? So I always say, you get 5 minutes to deal with the emotions. Go. And that's when they just like, I hate this sucks, like blah, 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 or they're crying or
that visceral,
whatever it might be, but it's very emotionally laden, right? Once that 5 minutes is up, like that's it. That's cool. I'm not going to say pack it away, sweep it under the rug, but that part is behind us because the only thing that you can control right now is like what happens moving forward. So what are the problems we need to solve? What have we tried? What have you considered? And then let's make our plan based on those things. Who can we go to for experience? What experience do I have to offer you? Do you need connections like X, Y, Z? But let's start taking the steps to move forward and build on whatever is going wrong. So that's my process. You can't say, get your feelings out of business because, everybody's different and has different. I'm definitely not an emotional one, but this might not land well, but like there is no place for emotions in business.
No.
So this reaction gets 5 minutes of attention and then we build and we move on from there.
And the reason for that is emotions will cloud judgment and you will eventually make decisions that are not only the wrong decision, but potentially catastrophic.
They're
all
reactive.
Because of emotion.
Yeah, they're reactive. You're making reactive decisions.
Right.
When you bring your emotions
and you have to be so careful. You have to find a way to release that emotion. For me, the gym.
Yeah.
I built out a very dark, dungeonous gym in my garage that I can go in there and train as hard as I want and get as angry as I want and release everything so that I know when I'm done, whatever decisions I have to make that day are going to be clear. Yeah. They're going to be clear-headed. They're going to be void of emotion because I've released whatever pent-up aggression or anxiety or fear or whatever I have about decisions I have to make that day. I've already released that.
Yeah, you got to take care of yourself first before you can go and handle all the other time and attention demanding things that other people and other things need from us.
Yeah, when I was talking to Jason Kalipa, he mentioned something great about you have to avoid the fluff.
Yeah.
Right? You have to be able to say no more. And that's
hard.
That really goes along the lines of what we're saying too, is you have to start saying no a lot more. Like, I was shocked how much I had to say no as I got more and more focused on what really mattered.
I think the first no is the hardest no. But man, does it get easier after that?
Yeah.
You know?
And it's okay. You're human. If you say no and it stings and it lives with you for a while, you're not alone. We've all been there.
You'll be okay.
You'll be all right. They'll forget about it too most of the time. If they don't, they're probably not someone you should be associating with anyways.
Also that.
So, we've all been through dark periods. You owned a gym for how many years? 15 years?
Yeah.
15 years. That was this year closed.
Yeah, 2.5 months ago. Just decided to shut the doors. Yeah.
Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I've been
interested in your thought process.
I'd been thinking about it for about 2 years. Just a natural progression in my life. I knew that I didn't want to be a gym owner for my entire life. Like, owning a gym was something I wanted to do. I knew that for sure because, obviously we love helping people change their lives. But as I grew up, quote unquote, in my entrepreneurial kind of journey, starting other businesses, my attention gets drawn other ways, other directions. And, at some point you have to evaluate if that thing, whatever that thing is for you, is worth it in terms of whatever your filters are. So mine was time first, money second, and how that aligned. And so in January, I decided that it no longer did that for me, that some of the things that I've set up in other places of my life are affording me greater amount of time and flexibility of that time, and also greater opportunities for money and all the other things that I needed from it with less work, which was the whole type of lifestyle that I am trying to build. Like, that was what was important to me. And so at some point in that process, you're just like, all right, cool. We had a great run. I went through the selling process, looked at closing it, just compared the two scenarios in what would my time cost and how long was that time going to be needed, because time was the thing that I was trying to get back. And then, that's how the equation worked out. And it just came to closing the doors was a better option, even if I could have made a little bit more money from selling the gym. So
right. That makes so much sense. And you know what? It's also, I'm sure, a lot more difficult when your pool of possible candidates to buy the gym is so small from being in a small town.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And it limits your mobility to...
And I think the context behind that decision is one of the most important things about this story. People hear oh, you closed the gym, and the first thing they say is, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
There, I had to throw a sorry in for you as a Canadian.
I appreciate that. We'll get to it in a boot too here sooner than later.
Just this morning, someone came up to me this morning and put their hand on my shoulder and they're like, I'm so sorry you closed the gym. And I was like, what? No. This is literally the best thing that could happen for me in my lifestyle right now. But the context behind that decision is so important. So that's why I think it's clear to lay out the decision-making factors. What was more important to me? Some people might want to make more money and go for a successful exit, and that matters to them. And that's cool. Amazing. That's your journey,
And I think it's important to understand that Taryn has a decision matrix, right? Most successful people have some sort of decision matrix of priorities. For me, my health is always going to be the number one priority. I know what it was like to be 350 pounds and really not have freedom of movement at all. So that's always going to kind of take a priority over other things. For me, next is family, right? My son, my wife, they're going to get priority over the business. And when it comes to the business, if the business is going to sink too deep into those other two things, then I'd be in the same boat.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm fortunate to have a masterclass team, a powerhouse team of professionals that allow me the flexibility and the time to be able to give to those other things.
Yeah.
But if that changed, again, my decision matrix is going to make a decision. And it's not going to be an emotional one. It's going to be based on what it's going to allow me the flexibility to be a great dad, a great husband, and a healthy, fit, both mentally and physically healthy and fit person.
That's amazing. Love it.
Right? So I appreciate you sharing that. Because like, there's a lot of people that live in that gray area of like, I need to do something for myself, whether it's closing, opening, hiring, stepping away, whatever it may be. I think a lot of people are living in that gray area because they don't have that decision maker matrix. They haven't figured out what those priorities are to make these decisions less emotional and more just factual. And
I don't think we talk about it enough. You know, like I think that gray area is something that some entrepreneurs might feel a little bit shameful to talk about. You know, it was surprising. I actually don't know why it was surprising, but it was surprising that as soon as, you know, I kind of started telling the story, or at least announced that I was doing this thing, just how many people came to me asking for advice. Like, here's the scenario that they're in. Here's how they feel about this thing that they have. And like, what should they do? Right. And it's okay to feel that way. Like you said at the beginning when we started this, like everybody gets that way. But I think we need to talk about it a little bit more. And, you know, the solutions still are the same. Like, obviously the first thing is like, well, I hope you have a mentor. And that's the conversation you should be having with your mentor. Because your mentor has context to that business and whether it's worth it and actually able to do the things that you're asking of it. And I mean, if the answer is no, then your mentor is going to help you build the secondary plan to get whatever your reprioritization that you need, you know?
Yeah, I think people need to understand the coach is not just there to tell you what to do. A lot of times a coach or a mentor is able to take a fishbowl view of something you're right here looking at from 6 inches away. They can see the whole picture.
Perspective.
They're not just hearing your side of it. They have experience. So they have other sides of this equation from experiences or other people that they've coached or mentored. And there's zero emotion for them.
Yeah.
So they're able to look at this really unbiased. And for me, the greatest parts of having mentors and coaches or people like yourself, I can just be like, hey, I need someone just to unbiased, filter this, give me just straightforward answer. What am I doing here?
Yeah.
It cleans things up to the point where you're just, the flexibility is insane. The ability to just pivot on a dime.
We know that. That's why we have coaches in the gym or in the nutrition space or whatever it might be. Like, you need coaches for everything. Like, literally everything.
I really hope people take this to heart. Like, this is probably one of the more profound conversations I've had because, you know, we're actually getting into the nitty gritty of a lot of decision making that I think a lot of business owners, I don't care what industry you're in, struggle with. And like you said, the minute you say I closed the gym, people are like, oh, you failed. Like you're bankrupt or, oh my God, that must have been so hard. But what you've actually done is the pinnacle to me of living a perfect day. Because you were able to make a straightforward, best decision for you.
Yeah, and that was the whole intention. And I think, again, too, like, context is important. That's almost one of the very first things I usually tell in that story is that the gym wasn't doing bad. Like, it wasn't. It checked all the boxes. It did what I needed it to do. Yeah, it was a little bit more time demanding than I wanted it to be, but I mean, that in and of itself is not a reason to shut the gym down. So it's important to know that, like, the gym was not doing bad. And that was actually a factor in why I did what I did. It's like, I wanted to control that narrative. I wanted it to go out on top, because shutting it down and ending that story is a whole different story when you're at the top, rather than you're broke and bankrupt and all your clients hate you and all your staff hate you. And like, it's a whole different story. And then deciding to close the gym, right? Like, and neither of those scenarios are failure. Like, let me be clear about that. But the whole intention was, things are going really well, but it just doesn't align with what I need from it right now, or anymore, rather. That's a better word to say. So you make that decision to pull that out of my life, because then the next step was, okay, the perfect day thing was always to get to Arizona. Like, I wanted to be able to live my life off my laptop, that I could go where I wanted, whenever I wanted, that I could pull a flight up in 24 hours and be across the world if I wanted to be. And, you know, there's many people who build gyms and businesses and whatever to self-function without them, but I just didn't like the fragility that, you know, I'm 2,000 miles away and something happens and I have to fly back to go and do that. It just didn't fit my bill anymore, and that's okay. And so now, you know, I have the time flexibility. That was the decision making. You have all these other things that are creating the money that I need. And now it's just a matter of like, cool, what's the next thing that needs to fall in line to make 6 months in Arizona happen? So
I love that, because I think people don't realize, like, what's the best way? I'm trying to think of how to phrase this right. So
it takes courage.
It's not just courage, but like having that filtration system for decisions is going to allow you to navigate mental health so much more powerfully.
God, I cannot agree more.
Because living in the grid probably creates more mental illness and mental deprivation than the decision itself. Because it's not the decision that is causing the problem. It's the lack of certainty on what the decision is that causes the problem. It's the anxiety of the unknown.
For me, it was like the emotional, because I occupied 15 years of my life. Like,
right.
I'm only 35. That's a huge chunk of my life, right? And so it took me a whole year just to say it out loud to somebody that I was even thinking about doing this. For that entire year, it was just an internal conversation that I was having that, like, this kind of doesn't feel like my thing anymore. And you just like swirl that around inside over and over. And like, imagine a year of just yourself. Like, I never even told my husband that. You know, I was afraid of what he would think, that like this thing that was providing income for our family. And, you know, it's just always been the thing that I have done for as long as he's been a part of my life, right? So that's all he knows too. And then finally, you know, a year into this, you start talking about it with like the gym owner circle, very close circle. Hey guys, like, I'm thinking about doing this. And then that just kind of like opens the door, you know? You find other people who have done it, maybe not necessarily to the way that this story played out, but like they've closed when they had multiple gyms and maybe shrunk down. So they can start to at least give you information. And now you're in the information gathering stage, where the more information you gather, the more it suppresses the emotional side, is kind of how I watched myself play through that. You know, it's like the more questions I asked, the more I could see my emotional part of it. And so one day you're just like, yep, that's it. Like, we're going to do it.
I think, it comes down to like, you have to look at it from a science perspective, right?
Exactly.
Like an emotional one, right? Science is about facts. It's about fact seeking, truth seeking. Like it's
just math.
It's an equation.
Yeah.
Right? X equals, I'm shutting this thing down, or X equals, nope, I'm going to find the person or the solution and I'm going to keep it going. But that's it. There's no in between. X is going to equal one of those two things.
I mean, when you look back on it in hindsight, you know, when I made the commitment to the timeline of like when I was going to do it, I was like, all right, I had asked one of my colleagues, like, okay, what is the next step? Like, how do I actually like start this? He handed me a spreadsheet. It had 3 tabs on it. There was like literally 3 steps to this process, and took me like 15 minutes to get the ball rolling. And wow. I stood there. I'm like, I cannot believe that 15 years of a business, and like all it took was 15 minutes to
all
just
it
like
took was a fucking
get things
spreadsheet.
organized. Yeah, it was so bizarre.
Wow. All right, I want to respect your time. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, man.
I know you got to get through international customs to get home here eventually. So, do you have anything you want to leave? Anything you want to say? Quote? Anything like that? Any thoughts?
Nothing specific. I just want people to go after the things that they actually want. And you might not know what that is right now, but even just sitting down, starting to write about it, think about it, or just have conversations about what other people want might stir some things inside that, like, you know what? I want that too. And once you find other people to talk to it about, or find other people who have done what you want to do, then it's just a matter of asking them, how do I make that thing happen? And so start asking questions. That's my best piece of advice.
That's a great way to end it. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Ask all the questions, guys.